All right. Hey, everybody. We are live. I'm joined by an impeccably dressed Andrew Egger. And hopefully pretty soon, Kyle Cheney of Politico is going to be joining us, because neither Andrew or I are lawyers, nor do we cover this stuff on the regular. But the big news today is that James Comey, there he is.
Hi.
Live and in the flesh.
Also not a lawyer.
Nah, but you cover this stuff more than we do, so we're grateful for your entrance here. Kyle Cheney of Politico joins us. We're joining everyone live because the big news now is that the indictments against James Comey and Letitia James have been dismissed. They were dismissed because the appointed U.S. attorney in this case, Lindsay Halligan, was ruled was illegally appointed. But Kyle, before Andrew and I pretend to know what we're talking about, why don't you tell us what actually is happening?
I may be pretending too here, but
no.
The story is the judge, as we suspected she would, ruled that the Halligan appointment was flawed from the beginning. That essentially the attorney general violated the appointments clause and federal law by appointing someone to a role that basically at this point required Senate confirmation. There had already been an interim U.S. attorney who served for the legal limit of 120 days. And once he was forced out, that's Eric Siebert was forced out, that you couldn't just appoint a new interim. You had to get a Senate confirmed person in there. And so essentially it unwinds everything. Basically, the judge rewound the clock to pre-indictment and said everything else after that is invalid.
That's amazing. Before we get into sort of the significance of this, which I contend is incredibly significant, I just want to make sure for the people who are just joining us that I have the chronology here. And you can correct me if I'm wrong because you've been covering this from the jump. So Eric Siebert is the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. He is there on an interim appointment, even though the two Democratic senators from the state are supportive of his nomination. Mm-hmm. He's handed this issue about James Comey and whether or not James Comey perjured himself in testimony before Congress about whether or not he had leaked two members of the media during the Clinton investigation, or was the Trump investigation about Trump's ties to Russia.
Yes.
Okay. Siebert, as we know from reporting, was of the mindset that there was not really a substantial case there.
Right.
That it's certainly not enough to bring to trial and get a conviction. He resists, and eventually Trump gets fed up and he fires Siebert. He pushes him out, and then he installs Lindsay Halligan, who is his ex-personal attorney, someone with absolutely no prosecutorial experience. I believe she was an insurance lawyer. Was that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, something like that. All right. She then brings the indictment, and here's where it gets a little hazy for me. She brings an indictment. She gets 2 of the 3 counts. She then brings the 2-count indictment back, but doesn't actually show the grand jury. It might be irrelevant.
That's a whole other issue. If they re-indict, I mean, now that this indictment's gone, I think that issue may go away too.
Can I say one thing on that? Because just real fast.
Wait. I just got to finish the chronology, and then you can say something. So then the question is from Comey's lawyers is, wait a second. So is the indictment correct? And also, is Lindsay Halligan actually allowed to be serving in this role because Siebert had already exceeded his 120 days, and therefore you have to go back to the Senate for confirmation? That's correct. All that's correct, right? Okay, Andrew, Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is that, like, I do sort of wonder if this news today is actually coming as a bit of like a breath of relief for Lindsay Halligan herself, because all like the last few weeks we have been just kind of, I mean, you especially, Kyle, but people have just been kind of watching with their jaws on the floor at some of the proceedings that have been going on in the very preliminary stages of this trial, which is like weird errors and slip ups and mess ups and procedure not being followed by this person who, again, has never run these prosecutions. And so if it is in fact the case that all of this, the ruling today short circuits all that, right? Like she could have run the best prosecution of all time, and this ruling would not be fundamentally different because it just says she was improperly appointed in the first place. So it kind of takes it off of her plate.
No, you nailed it. Actually, I've had this exact conversation with colleagues in my newsroom about this is the cleanest outcome for her personally, because every other outcome involves her screwing up, her doing something pernicious, like the vindictive prosecution angle, which that will, if they re-indict, that will come back too. And there's a whole other question about whether they can re-indict Comey over this. yeah, that this removes those from the equation at this point. If they do reindict, presumably they wouldn't make the same procedural screw ups that they did, and those wouldn't be live issues. There would be many other issues and obstacles to bringing these cases either way, but not those embarrassing sort of inexperienced related ones.
So Kyle, the question of reindictment is actually quite critical here because they had rushed this prosecution to get in front of the statute of limitations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they made the indictment, they got it in time, they got it before the grand jury, whatever you want to say about how that process went, they did get an indictment under the statute. Now that she's invalid, or invalidated, I should say, Comey's lawyers are arguing that this is done. He's in the clear.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if it was with prejudice because we are now past the statute of limitations. Do they have a point?
They do. I mean, that actually, in my read of the ruling initially, was that the judges almost echoed that. She dismissed the case without prejudice, which is a key thing that basically says they could theoretically reindict. You know, if you dismiss it with prejudice, she says that there's no circumstance in which you should be able to rebring this case. She's leaving that open, but she also says in the same breath, but because this indictment was invalid from the beginning and Pam Bondi's appointment of Lindsay Halligan to this role, wasn't legal, that shouldn't give you this automatic, tolling of the statute of limitations. I'm seeing a lot of debate on X and on social media that sort of suggests that the judge may not have fully explained that there are other avenues to bring this indictment again, that there is still a 6-month grace period for DOJ to try again, despite her analysis. So what
would the avenues be?
Well, I mean, essentially, there's a law on the books that says if an indictment is dismissed for any reason, even after the statute of limitations, it gives DOJ a 6-month reprieve to try again. And so my read of what the judge was saying is because there was no valid indictment at the outset, that doesn't apply. Right. But that may not be the case. There's other interpretations of it to say that no matter the reason, even if it's because the valid indictment was void from the beginning, DOJ still gets that 6-month grace period.
Yeah, the one interesting question there is can they? But then obviously the other really interesting one is will they, right? Because I mean, that's the other weird thing about this is like the reason that Halligan was stuck in there in the first place is because Donald Trump plainly thought like he wasn't going to get anybody else who would pull the trigger on this thing for him. That's why he forced Eric Seibert out in the first place. And it seems like the career prosecutors who were working under Seibert shared his opinion. I mean, maybe I'm mixing up the cases with the Comey and the Letitia James here. Am I correct to understand that was pretty much their recommendation going forward, like as a procedural matter from the career staff in that office? And there was no indictment here.
And the evidence of that is that she had none of them with her in the grand jury room. She brought this single-handedly. It's one of the reasons the indictment has to go is that there was no career person in there putting their signature on this, that even if you kick off Lindsay Halligan, at least someone with authority was there, and there wasn't. So I think that's true.
Could they, I guess in theory, there's a couple ways around this, right? One is try to get a different judge to consider the case. Is that a possibility?
I don't think so. I think they would stick with the judge here. You couldn't, but I think so in addition to finding another prosecutor, they could in theory have Lindsay Halligan do it again, but she would have to do it under a different authority. She wouldn't be the interim U.S. attorney. What they tried to do was retroactively say, oh, by the way, she's the first assistant, special U.S. attorney from the district. I think they could do that in a legitimate way, but they couldn't do it retroactively to the date.
Wait, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. She could take on a title in the office that's not interim U.S. attorney. They could find some other interim U.S. attorney who could then hire Lindsay Halligan as a attorney.
I don't even know if they need to find someone new to lead the office. They would just appoint her to a position that is within the attorney general's power to put her in as like a special assistant U.S. attorney or something in the office. There may be other ways.
Give her a new title, basically. That's more.
Yeah, I think that's one of the arguments I think DOJ would have in their favor. Actually, is like, look, this is a technicality. Like the attorney general clearly has the authority to put someone in that office in a different role, not as maybe as interim U.S. attorney, but in another role in which she would have been empowered to bring this case. But they didn't do it, so the initial indictment's gone. But maybe she could do it the right way the next time.
Kyle,
but they can't get a new judge. You don't think
that would go back to the same judge, presumably.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I ask you a different procedural question? Because one of the things that was so interesting about this indictment is that the judge kind of talked early on at length about after that 120-day period is expired, it's no longer the attorney general's job to appoint this interim or acting U.S. attorney, and that job actually reverts to, I believe, a panel of the district courts, or the district judges rather, in that jurisdiction. And we saw that earlier this year with Alina Habba in New Jersey, where she ran out her 120 days. They tried to appoint somebody new, and then the DOJ tried to find a way to get around that and get Habba back in there. If we were to see that happen in this district, like if the judges were now to say, all right, this position has been declared vacant and like we need to stick somebody else in there, would that be, I mean, would we see like a repeat of the Habba thing from the DOJ, or like, can we know how they would respond, or is it too early to tell?
This is a very live issue because I think there's like 5 districts in the country where this is happening and it's being litigated. It's up in the appeals court in the 3rd district, which is based on the Habba case. I think if I remember right, the district judges did appoint Siebert to take that to the job. So after his 120 days ran out, they appointed him to it, and then he's supposed to serve indefinitely until they get a Senate confirmed replacement.
Right.
DOJ and the Trump administration in general, their view of executive power is we can't have the courts telling us who to put in this role. It's not, we think we'll win on that fight eventually. They haven't yet, but that is, not out of the realm that they could actually win that fight.
Just because that statute would be like actually unconstitutional.
Yeah, the way the Supreme Court has been, siding with him on executive power and say, like, is it really on something of this consequence, a U.S. attorney? Do we really think it's appropriate for the courts to be stepping on the executive's turf on that? Right. I mean, that law had been that had been the case for 150 years until now, essentially. I mean, there's been some around that, but I could see that.
We're hearing a lot of that these days, Kyle.
Yeah, right.
I want to talk a bit about the politics of this, and maybe less politics, but like the status of the DOJ too. Like, to me, as someone who's talked to a bunch of people who've worked at the DOJ, who knows people who have worked at the DOJ, who's talked to people about what's happening at the Eastern District of Virginia specifically, like, this is a humiliation. I mean, I understand it was a technical issue, and maybe it was the most elegant way for Lindsay Halligan to get out of this, and I could understand that case. But starting with the mishap, the sort of ham-fisted indictment itself, and the appointment, and now this dismissal, this is really sort of a deeply unprofessional series of events. And I don't know if there's another way to actually read that, frankly.
I mean, because it's as Andrew was saying, it's the cleanest version. I think there's another universe where, and in fact, I think in some ways what Comey would have preferred is for the judge to have ruled on the vindictive prosecution issue before this happened.
Right. This is deeply unprofessional, the way this happened.
Yeah, it's a rush job. It's sloppy. There's still unresolved questions about whether she botched the grand jury process itself. So forget the appointment, but did she misinstruct them on the law? As we talked about the 2-count indictment versus the 3-count, did they make some procedural screw ups there? Both of those issues could have sunk the indictment separately than the appointment issue. And then you have the vindictive prosecution issue, which would have been, I think, the most politically explosive way for this case to be thrown out.
And think about how many people quit the office over this, just to end up at this outcome. I mean, you lost a lot of institutional talent. And I maybe you know this, but I don't. But like, obviously the Letitia James case is also now at least iced. Are there other cases that she's involved in, that she's touched, that could be, in theory, hampered by this? I mean, we only know of these 2 high-profile ones, but she is the acting U.S. attorney.
I doubt it. I doubt it because of what I mentioned before, which is that the other cases, if they're run-of-the-mill cases, are all signed and carried out by assistant U.S. attorneys.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I don't know. Andrew thinks this is the best outcome, so I'll let him make his case.
Oh, just in theory, kind of like what Kyle was just saying. In theory, among the plausible outcomes, this is the one that lets Trump run the playbook he would want to run, where it's just a deep state judge who's throwing Comey a bone, and they don't rule on the merits of the selective prosecution or anything like that. I mean, like, that is all just to assume that there was never really a universe in which this was going to lead to conviction, which I think is true. But obviously, I'm sure if you're Comey, you're like, this is pretty fine outcome for me as well.
Well, and this is the quickest outcome. So, I think as Andrew just alluded to, I think one of the questions was, does Trump care about a conviction, or does he just want to drag someone through the process, make it humiliating, make it expensive, make it long? This has been 6 weeks, right, since the indictment. I think, am I doing that math right? 7 weeks, maybe. And now the case is gone.
It was mid to late September. So yeah, it's been a little 6 or 7 weeks, something like that. Yeah.
So in that, we're getting there, and like these cases can drag out for years. And so, if Trump wanted to drag him through this process in an excruciating way, this was not it. This was not the outcome. It's the best outcome for Comey in that sense.
I suppose. I think Trump wanted a conviction. And I think that, yeah, maybe he wanted to humiliate. Of course, he wants to humiliate Comey, right? He wants to make.
But I think, to Andrew's point, you get to yell deep state. If you don't get the outcome you want, you get to yell Biden appointed judge, rig the trial against.
Well, they would have yelled that. They would have yelled that too if the judge ruled against Halligan because of the shady indictment that she filed. They said, "Oh my God!"
They probably will yell about it anyway today. We'll see.
He hasn't tweeted yet. I was checking. I was checking a minute ago. No tweets. It is interesting not to open like a whole nother like can of worms. But like if there's a question of, okay, this is pretty embarrassing for them, will they learn anything from this? It is interesting that this comes out the same day as the announcement from Pete Hegseth at the Department of War at the Defense Department about potentially court-martialing Mark Kelly over it's like just the same playbook over and over and over again. I guess if you throw enough of those, you're still
we have the Adam Schiff one too, right?
Mm-hmm. Schiff and Ed Martin was sort of flicking at the Schiff thing, hanging out there still and live.
Well, let me ask you about that, Kyle, because there was that story from MS Now last week where they're saying that federal prosecutors in Maryland or I forget what it was, DOJ officials were looking at whether Bill Polt and Ed Martin had done some illegal activity with respect to the mortgage issues involving Adam Schiff. Did you get any reporting on that, or what's your take on that?
Not a ton of direct reporting, but Ed Martin has directly disavowed that, and one of the Pam Bondi's former chief of staff was out there saying this is not what's going on here. They're misreading it. They were running down different evidence trails for how to shore up the case that they're building against Schiff, and Ed Martin basically endorsed that, saying I'm not supposed to comment on cases that are ongoing, but it sounds right.
But Patriots remain in control,
right? And so I'm not sure what if that's just spin, but I somewhat doubt that this Justice Department is investigating Ed Martin while he's overseeing.
Yeah, that didn't seem right to me at the surface. I was like, wait a second, they're not going to talk.
I mean, there may be legitimate questions about how they obtained some of this information. I think there are, and if Democrats ever retake the House, that's going to be one of the top of the agenda is to seek that and seek things like that out for how those systems were. Misused.
Hey Kyle, if you have to go do reporting, just pull your ear and I'll let you go. We can do it subtly, or we can do it the normal way. You can just say, I gotta go. I guess the other question I have is about just sort of the broad elements of like the politicization of the Justice Department. Like, do we now expect any impact in whether or not they bring a case against Schiff? Who else are they looking into? I guess Kelly is the court-martial thing, but like, I don't see this as them looking and saying, "Oh, we got to hit the brakes. This is too much. We can't afford any more embarrassments." But if I were them, I would maybe rethink my strategy.
I mean, I'm one of the curious things about the Schiff case is who's going to bring that one, because they don't have a similarly appointed. They don't have a Lindsay Halligan in Maryland right now.
But all the contemporaneous reporting is that that office is also dubious about the merits of the charge, right? And
I think Ed Martin is technically a special assistant U.S. attorney in that office. He's in DC too, and a couple other places. But
what can't he do?
Right. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know to what degree he's directing traffic on this or overseeing it.
The question I have on these contemporaneous reports about the offices, and this would have maybe factored into the Halligan thing, would that have come into play in a trial, right? Like, would Comey's attorneys have been like, hey, I want to introduce this article about how every other attorney refused to put their name on this case?
You couldn't really bring in a news article, but they would be what would happen next is discovery. I think if the judge didn't just throw out the case on vindictive prosecution grounds, just on what's obvious. I mean, Comey says you don't even need discovery. Just look at what Trump said. Look at what played out. That's enough to say this is a vindictive prosecution. If the judge said, I'm not quite there yet, they would say, I need discovery. We need to get into the documents. We need to get material from DOJ. to show us how this prosecution came together, and he'd be entitled to that. So I think they'd get underneath, get under the surface on it.
And where's Seibert in all this? Has he said anything?
Another person, again, them take the House, have him, he'd be the first person to come testify. He could be involved or become involved in this if there is a selective prosecution, further discovery on this and further investigating of it. I do suspect there's, it could be a deal. I mean, you would think the Inspector General would be looking into stuff like this too, although they've been very quiet in that office since Trump took over and basically fired a bunch of IGs. These are things that usually would come to light in some forum or another.
All right, last question before I let you go. Well, Andrew, you go, and then I have one more question.
Well, I just kind of keep coming back to, like, yes, they're going to rant and rave and rage about this, but, like, in some respects, this actually does seem to have been like a political gift. Like, just I just remember when Comey was first indicted, like, I think it was Greg Sargent at the New Republic had a piece that was like, all right, they did it. And then he was like licking his chops about all that stuff you were talking about right now with the discovery. I mean, just like, I personally find it difficult to believe that this particular DOJ and these particular people are doing like a really good job, like leaving a plausible deniability paper trail about this sort of thing. And like, if they were to reindict, that is some stuff they would have to worry about. If this were to get further along in the process, that stuff would come out. You know what I mean? Right.
That's true. I mean, some of it may anyway, but you're right. I think they're in a sense dodging a bullet here. And if they want to just come away with, hey, look, James Comey got indicted, some Democratic appointed judges, derailed the case, and we don't have much hope for the future, so we'll just let it go. That might be the cleanest outcome for them, where they get to claim some victory.
You can't selection. That's another question.
I just disagree. I disagree. I'll get into that after I let Kyle go. But Kyle, last question for you. It's just sort of paint your most likely picture for how the future of these cases go. Not just Comey, but James. Do you imagine they just drop it entirely, like you suggested? Obviously, with the James one, it's different because the statute of limitations is not passed. So. And also, if you can touch on the answer, like, what's the future for Lindsay Halligan? I mean,
she can go back to the White House, or as I said, they could try to reappoint her in some sort of more official and valid position and have her.
Do you think? But you think she's done as the interim U.S. attorney?
I think she's done as the interim U.S. attorney. I mean, they can fight it like they are for Haba and for others too.
Yeah.
I think some of those other cases are further along, so we may get a ruling that affects stuff like this, the outcome here before this one ever reaches, an appeals court. But so Halligan, if she wants to continue, taking abuse from the judges and so she's subjecting herself to this kind of scrutiny, she can keep going. And the cases themselves, I think, if they can find someone, either Halligan again or someone else to prosecute them, I think they'll try again. It's hard to see them rolling over and saying we're done. Comey's off the hook. They keep talking about this grand conspiracy case in Florida that. I don't know too much about that, but maybe they could find another way to punish these people that allows them to let this particular one go. But
Will Summers been writing about that one. It's hanging out there in the ether for MAGA. They're very excited about that one.
It is, and I'm not sure if that's all just this sort of cycle feeding on itself of this bubble that's going to burst at some point and not turn out to be what they think it is. But
no, it just gets bigger. That's what happens. It just grows in size.
Right.
All right, man. Hey, thank you for doing this. You're a busy man. I know that this is a lot to ask. I'm sure you got like 5 more articles you got to write before the day is done. So, all right, Kyle Cheney, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Everyone, check him out on Politico. Okay, Andrew, you stay with me. I'm gonna just totally disagree with you. I just think this is my theory. Okay, the base has been so conditioned for some indictment, some bloodlust, someone to be thrown behind bars, right? And it just keeps not happening for them. And obviously they set themselves up for failure. But you can't just be like, the deep state got us again. Oh, shucks, some judge, Democrat appointed judge got us. I just don't think that's going to be sufficient. I mean, again, maybe there's no other better outcome, but I just don't think this is a good outcome at all.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, first of all, on that last point at all. If it's a good outcome, I only mean that it's like the least bad political outcome here for them. And
Right.
just to be clear on that. But I also think, like, I don't know, because for a long time, I would have just thought that it was just something you kind of set your clock to, that like MAGA out there in the world would find whatever outcome happened spinnable on Trump's terms, right?
Right.
And that like they would be happy to accept his narrative of, look, it's just the deep state again, yada yada yada, and at least like be willing to see another delay happen in that way. But I don't know. I mean, like, we're at such a weird time right this minute where like there are these cracks that are springing up between Trump and his own base in sort of unprecedented ways. We've talked about the Epstein files stuff. We've talked about Marjorie Taylor Greene, like all these sorts of things. And it is not implausible to me to think that like this will be more of a problem for Trump than this sort of thing would have been in the past. So I guess in that sense, I don't completely disagree with what you're saying either.
I guess you should put it in the larger context of just, the vindictiveness of the administration and whether they're good at it. So like you mentioned the Kelly thing today, but why don't you just sort of go through for the viewers, because they might not be caught up, what actually is happening with Mark Kelly and the other 5 Democrats who recorded that video and what Trump, I should say, what the DOD did today.
Yeah. I imagine people are at least a little familiar with this story because it's been in the news. It's these Democrats in Congress with these national security or intelligence backgrounds who recorded this video last week or the week before. I'm already losing track of my timeline. Basically, just like direct to camera, talking to people in the intelligence community, talking to people in the military, basically reiterating what is a basic sort of principle of serving in one of those roles, which is that you have no obligation, no duty to obey unlawful orders, even from people in your chain of command. And in fact, you have an active duty not to obey an order that you know to be unlawful. They just basically made that point. They did not tie it to any particular Trump policies that are going on right now. Obviously, it comes in the context of a lot of controversy around, for instance, the Trump White House authorizing these strikes on these boats off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean, or these National Guard deployments to U.S. cities, things like that. But they were pretty clear and pretty careful, I think, not to actively accuse the White House of any specific illegal action, of saying like, don't obey when they say to do this. They were just reiterating the basic principle. But the White House flipped out. I mean, it went absolutely nuts. Trump obviously called for them all to be prosecuted with sedition, to be executed. He actually said that explicitly. He said sedition punishable by death. They should all be convicted of that. He retweeted some other guy on Truth Social who was saying, hang them up. That's what George Washington would do. And then people like Stephen Miller, who were out there basically saying, these people are fomenting an insurrection. That's what's happening right now. So real heavy rhetoric. And last week,
you think that's heavy?
Mentioned, yeah, as far as medium heavy, at least. Yeah.
I feel like he could have notched it up a few.
Yeah, exactly. They should be drawn and quartered or something, or crucified.
Something.
I don't know. Yeah. Hanging. That's a humane, nice humane. No, I don't know. The other thing Trump said last week was that Pete Hegseth was looking into it, right? Because again, some of these people are former military, and so that was the announcement that we got today. Was
all of them are either former military or used to work in the CIA or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Kelly, obviously former U.S. Navy captain, the DOD or DOW, I guess, if you want to use the Department of Defense /War, the DOD,
Department of Defense,
the Defense Department announced that they had opened an investigation, a military investigation into whether what Kelly had done constituted, by just by releasing that video, had constituted like criminal. A criminal attempt to like foment discord or lower morale inside the U.S. Armed Forces, essentially. And they basically said that's a crime. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I looked into it very briefly. It's a crime that's punishable by up to 10 years in prison if he's convicted of it. So that's what's going on. Yeah.
And then they announced today. Yeah, they're going to do court-martial proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say Ruben Gallego, who is Mark Kelly's colleague in the Senate from Arizona, has a tweet in response to their statement saying, "Fuck you and your investigation."
There you go. That sounds a little more like Gallego. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about this. Is it's like it just seems like, maybe I'm wrong, but it really seems like this is a really terrible fight for the administration to be picking in a bunch of different ways.
And so now that gets me back to why, because this is a live stream about the Comey news, but the reason I brought it up is they pick bad fights, or they pick unwinnable fights. Like they are just picking these fights time and again where they're going to lose. Or if they win, it's just by like a 1% chance of winning. And I get it because they have a lust for, partisan warfare and for winning headlines and for satisfying the base because they made all these promises to the base. But boy, it's like they're setting themselves up for failure time and again. And that's what happened here. This case against Comey, you talk to any lawyer, they looked at it and they laughed at it. They thought it was ridiculous on the merits. Now, it was not dismissed on the merits. It was dismissed on, I don't even want to say technicality because it was about an appointment for this U.S. attorney post. But I just feel like an administration that was more, I don't know, professional, sophisticated, whatever word you want to use, would recognize that these are fights you cannot win and you have to find different off ramps.
Yeah.
And they're going to end up elevating people that they want to, suppress. Like Mark Kelly's going to raise millions of dollars off of this. Like James Comey was living a life where he was moving shells around a beach and shit. Like what we did, this guy ended up becoming like, he got a renewed lease.
Yeah. All it's going to do for Comey is rehabilitate his sort of resistance, cred.
Comey had no constituency prior to this. Right. They gave this guy a second act.
No, I mean, I keep using the phrase "high on their own supply" about all these.
It's
kinds
true,
of things.
though.
I really do think it's true. I mean, like the people who matter, the decision makers here, Trump and Stephen Miller, and these other like few guys in the actual like chain of making things happen here. They have like a gas mask on and it's hooked up to like the exhaust pipe of like right-wing social media, right? I mean, like it really is like it'd be one thing like there's a political side and a like execution side here. And I just think they lose on both sides here. Like, I think it's crazy that the president is out here like tweeting that these lawmakers should be put to death because of this like very straightforward and like,
hey, the White House clarified.
Video.
The White House clarified he did not want.
Yes, Donald Trump, Carolyn Levitt. Donald Trump does not want to see any of these people put to death. Yeah, whatever. He tweeted it. Okay, sorry, we didn't make him tweet it. We were a little surprised he tweeted it, but he did tweet it. So like that's crazy. That does not the median voter is not won over by that, even as a political messaging matter. But then to take it from a political messaging matter, where like you can say anything and like maybe it's not a winning issue, but like what are you going to do? It's just you said it and then it'll poll one way or another. But not only that, then they actually try to make it happen procedurally in this way that there's not a chance he will be like subjected to these like an actual court-martial penalty and lose and like and lose like among a military jury or whatever. I mean, come on, there's just it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, people can own us, whatever, but it's not going to happen. There's a 0.001% chance that it will happen. How about that? We'll say that. I think 0. I don't think it'll happen.
You've just manifested it into happening. All right, look, I don't have much more to add on the Comey thing. It was an interesting development. I'm very curious to see how the administration responds to it. I think that's the real tell. Like, we know how Comey's going to respond. We know how Letitia James is responding. She put out a statement already. I can grab it quickly. Nah, I can't get it in time. What's really going to be interesting is how does this White House respond? And from all we know, they're just going to double down. I mean, they'll just find a way to try to get the case brought back. But we'll see. Any last thoughts before we let you go? Also, can you explain why you're so well dressed? I think people are kind of curious.
Oh, I'm just doing CNN in like an hour. Unless they bump me because there's so much news. This news was not all there when I got scheduled for CNN. So we'll see. Maybe I put on the time for nothing. But I don't know. Like the other element for that, for like trying to find additional avenues is like there actually aren't all that many people who are like meet all the criteria here. Like the fact that Lindsay Halligan was the person who was appointed, even though she had 0 prosecutorial experience or anything like that. Like Trump has kind of run through his list of like qualified lawyers who he trusts to be just like yes men for him. It's like, that
can't be that. There's got to be someone down there.
But that's what I'm just saying. Like, I mean, your insurance attorney who like helped you with some like random stuff, like that's your attack dog to go get James Comey. And it's because Bondi's got a job, Kash Patel's got a job, Matt Gaetz, you don't think you can get in there, and like all these sorts of things. And it's just like they are kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of their actual talent pool in some respects here. In some respects, there are a lot. I mean, if they ever need guys to like make social media videos for them or like post on their behalf, stuff like that, march in the streets, sack the Capitol, all kinds of people like will step up and do those things. But as far as like actually, staffing out these different U.S. attorneys' offices with people who have absolutely no qualms about just doing whatever the president wants and have the law degree and, are bar certified and everything, that's not necessarily an incredibly deep well of people on deck.
No, absolutely right. All right, buddy. I know you got to do a lot of prep work for CNN. Hair makeup.
This kind of was that. I think it's all the same stuff. Oh, hair and makeup. Yeah, exactly. My face will be transformed by the next time you see me on.
Maybe you can get one of these fly hats.
That is a cool hat. I got some of the other ones. I got some of the. I don't have them around me, but go to thebulwark.com. Get our merch.
Get our merch.
It's actually cool. Look at Sam. Look how good he looks.
A belated thank you again to Kyle Cheney, who joined us. Kyle's great. You guys got to follow him if you don't on Twitter. Also at Politico. He's fantastic. Always a pleasure when he joins us. Andrew Edgar, sign up for his newsletter, Morning Shots, where he's going to be covering stuff like this. Sign up for our YouTube feed, where you get stuff like this all the time. And until our next big breaking news, we'll talk to you soon. Later.